Gosalvez. She's the CMO of Climeworks. And I'm not quite sure if I can officially say this, but Climeworks is probably the best funded or one of the best funded climate tech companies out there. Is that right?
Yeah, probably thanks to our latest equity raise in April last year.
And it seems like since we had our session at Change Now, so much has happened. I've just looked through Google News, and there's been the news coming in of Climeworks closing new contracts with the likes of Microsoft, UBS, and you're also announcing new plans. So we'll dive into that in a very second. But very quick introduction to you. What do you do, and what does Climeworks do? And then we'll dive into the specifics.
Yeah, so as you said, I'm the CMO at Climeworks, and that means taking care of all the marketing, communication, and B2C business, right? Climeworks is one of the only company enabling individuals to take carbon removal action directly, straight to the provider. And so what Climeworks does is actually providing carbon dioxide removal as a service to companies and individual alike via direct air capture. Right, so maybe just a minute on direct air capture. What is direct air capture? Direct air capture is the process to extract CO2 from the ambient air, right, from the atmosphere. And once we do that through our technology, we then remove it by storing it, in our case, permanently underground via mineralization through our storage partner. And that combination of capturing it from the air and then storing it gives you the carbon removal as a service.
Amazing. And you're already working with a range of companies. Can you give us some examples on how you work with them?
Yeah, basically, we're delivering, and we're working with companies with a purchase agreement for carbon credits. Typically, we started with a pioneering company in this space, so Stripe and Shopify, who wanted to kickstart the market very early on, then with the Microsoft portfolio that they have announced in 2021. More recently, with the likes, of UBS and a renewed purchase from Microsoft. So representing very often long-term commitments. Swissre was another one recently as well. So 10 years and multi-years commitment to purchase carbon removal credit quantities. And aside that, we also have a large community of individual, we call pioneers, right, taking a pioneering action to remove CO2 from the air, of now over 16,000 people. And anyone can take action directly on our website. So we do have these two audiences that we talk to.
Amazing. And I know this is a very common question, but I just want to cover the ground for anybody that's not too deep in the space of carbon removal. Obviously, there's a wide range of solutions. There's nature-based solutions, i.e. planting trees, or even ocean-based solutions of capturing carbon. There's direct air capture and a few other options. Can you just give us a brief overview of that and what makes direct air capture so promising?
Well, I think the first thing to remember is, when you take a step back, so first drastic emission reduction will be needed, about 90%, right? That's the IPCC saying it. But we are now at the stage where carbon removal is also a must. And there are different ways, as you said, to deliver carbon removal, nature-based options. So can be reforestation, afforestation, biodiversity and forest enhancement, that kind of solutions, hybrid solutions, also technological solution like direct air capture, for instance. And I would say, unfortunately, we need all of them, right? We need all of them. All the solutions have different benefits. Obvious one for nature-based solution being biodiversity, and at the other end of the spectrum, I would say, for a solution like direct air capture is land effectiveness, right? So the plan that you see behind me, for instance, which Orca was launched in September 2021 in Iceland, is about 1,000 times more effective than tree on the same land area. And we know land and biomass are very precious in a context of 8 billion people planet that we have to live on and also feed at some point, right? So being land effective is one of the key things. The way we developed our technology is also modular. It's also very measurable. And more importantly, when combined with storage solutions like the one that we have at Orca with our partner company Carbfix, is permanent. Right. So that means we are talking geological storage. The CO2, once it's captured, it's actually mixed with water, and this very sparkling drink, if you want, is injected underground and then reacting with a basalt rock in the case of Orca and the Carbfix technology, and is mineralized. So that literally means turning into stone, into solid material in a little over 2 years, right? So that's permanently remove. And that's obviously a very different life cycle, I would say, than other solution. But given the magnitude of what we need to achieve, we need all solutions working together.
Absolutely. I'd love to, in a previous panel, we talked a bit about the gigaton scale impact, and obviously 2150 is talking a lot about that as well, which was great to have Jacob on board earlier. What would it take for you to really have that gigaton scale impact? How would that look like, and what are kind of the biggest hurdles to get there?
Well, so first, I think it's the plan. I think that's very clear. 2050 gigaton scale for Climeworks. So that's what we actually working towards at the moment. There are a couple of things that needs to be happening, right? So the first one is the market, right? Obviously, we do have pioneering companies doing multi-year commitments and integrating direct air capture and carbon removal within the climate solution portfolio, and we need more of those. We need more of the long term, right? Because deploying the technology, building new plants, we're talking 10, 15 years project lifetime, right? So we do need that commitment coming in now and coming in a very qualitative way. And playing into that, obviously, is everything around the policy market, the policy incentive, or the policy constraint, so to say, right, that will enable companies to take that commitment even more quickly. The second point that needs to happen is everything around the infrastructure. Right, as you can see, these are plans that need to be built, and they sit within an infrastructure of energy supply upstream, and then storage solution downstream. We are, uniquely and only supplied by renewable energy, right? So we would go in places that offer that. In Iceland, it's geothermal energy, but obviously, that can also work with other different type of renewable energy. So this energy needs to be available for us, but also for decarbonizing the overall world. And then downstream, the storage, right? So it means having the right partners, but also having the right permit and the right location. So all this, I would say, critical factors are united in Iceland, where we have Orca, and also we are building the next plant called Mammoth, for which we broke ground in June last year, and are well advanced into building the plant. But obviously, looking ahead, we will need to build more and bigger ones around the world, and that's the condition that we need to have. That's playing into the scientific community, but also the different companies, and also all the incentive that then the policy and the governments can create. At the end of the last panel, someone was mentioning the Inflation Reduction Act. That's typically the type of climate action and context that will then favor the emergence or the go-to-market speed for the type of partnership and hubs that we need to create to reach the gigaton scale.
Got it. What do you think is needed from the side of policymakers, the side of investors, in terms of action to, support at scale carbon removal, whether that's with Climeworks or other solutions out there? What do you think needs to happen now so that we actually get to that goal of gigaton impact?
Well, I would say probably two things, right? The first one is continuing supporting financially the deployment of the technology and the understanding that we're talking an infrastructure type of deployment that takes time, right? Very similar to what we have seen with renewable energy, wind and solar being deployed in the past decade. So I think that understanding, that timeline, and that confidence about the deployment benefits and the iteration and learning that will bring. The second part is the push for high standards, right? Given the limited time, so to say, that we have, we need to focus on the technologies that are the most effective and the highest quality. And that's always something that we've been preaching, but also leading by example, hopefully at Climeworks, right? With the life cycle analysis, really proving the effectiveness of our solution, right? The Orca plant was actually assessed by a third party at 90% effectiveness, so only 10% gray emission. And we recently released the first cradle to grave methodology, third party verified for direct air capture and storage combined. So carbon removal via direct air capture, and that's something that we feel is the right thing to do and needs to be continually pushed. So this level of expectation probably from investors, but also government is a healthy thing to do.
If we look at the volunteer carbon market, where you're obviously operating, and you kind of hinted at a few points there already in terms of quality, obviously there's such a range of solutions and providers that whether it's a small startup trying to take action and be part of the solution, or a large corporate, it can be really difficult to navigate and to understand what should we actually focus on. What's your advice, obviously beyond everybody going to Climeworks, but on a more general level, to how to understand like the quality of carbon removal solutions out there, and how should companies think about that?
Yeah, I mean, again, we need everyone, right? So I think the key point is understanding the portfolio, right? That they need to build a portfolio, to have partners that are either in-house, right? When you're a big company like Microsoft, there was a really amazing capability built up in-house, to have the right assessment capabilities for a wide range of solution that was made. Not everyone has the same means, right? But there are resources out there, and one of them, for instance, is Carbon Plan, right? That assesses the different solution separately with different lengths of criteria, right? So it can be co-benefits, that can be permanence, that can be scalability, right? One of the stakes today is not only buying quantities for tomorrow, for a certain period of time, but also enabling the scale up of the solution. And as such, you want to make sure that the scale up can actually be done, by design, from a technological standpoint. And the fact that the Climeworks solution, for instance, is modular, right? You see two containers upon each other, but it can be stacked. A third one actually will be stacked at Mammoth, the neighbor plant in Iceland. So all these kind of parameters will help people understand better what they are buying, right? The quality of the service, but also the quality of the proposition that they are putting their dollars towards. And again, different benefits for different solutions. But I think it's really good when you have a certain grid of reading. Carbon Plan again provides one. That's very helpful. I would also encourage people to speak, or to listen to the learnings from Stripe, Shopify, that are obviously very literate because they've been the first ones a couple of years ago already, and now obviously involved into Frontier as an advanced market commitment. So these are the resources that can be available. And obviously, our teams, like a lot of what we discuss with companies is first a bigger picture, right? Not only Climeworks, but like what does climate action, carbon removal at large means, and what are the different criteria to look into that. And then obviously at some point Climeworks, but it's a general education, I would say.
Some really good tips there. And I'm just going to shout out two companies. We're not getting paid by them for this, but these are solutions that we've been using ourselves. Obviously, Stripe Climate, you mentioned Stripe already, is something that's available to anyone that's using Stripe, where you can basically put a part of your profit into things like Climeworks. that's great. And then the other one as well, UK-based startup, and we have the founder speaking later on, is Ecology, which is nature-based solutions, trees and mangroves. So have a look at that as well. There's loads of more solutions, but these are like two that we're using ourselves here at Impact Hustlers. Great. So what I'd like to understand is a little bit the journey that you take your partners on. Obviously, you're signing these big companies to partner with you. Obviously, from a devil's advocate perspective, you could say, okay, we're like this huge company with this huge, massive footprint. We're just going to send you some money to then take the carbon out of the air, and that's it. I know your approach is quite different. So tell us about your approach, how you actually work with companies, and what's your recommended pathway for companies to kind of start their journey towards net zero.
Well, I think that's a very good question. I think what it's not so much about what we do, but also who we work with. And I think what we observe as a pattern of the people we work with, very, very often people who are already engaged into a robust climate action plan. That very often means having targets that are recognized, by the SBTI initiative already. So they really understand the dynamics between drastic emission reduction and then carbon removal on one hand, and then really guiding them into, okay, what are the right quantities, but also what's the right glide path, right, into moving into high quality solution like Climeworks, and what should be the right portfolio split. It really depends. Some companies have internal carbon pricing, for instance, right, that they use to generate an internal carbon budget. Some companies want to evolve over time and start small, but then really gradually evolve. Some other companies are more into long-term partnerships, right? And how do we work that? So we also learned a lot, right, by working with those companies on how that best fits into their approach to business and to climate action in general.
Got it. We got some questions coming in through the Q&A feature, and feel free to submit them. We're going to try to squeeze them in. We're not going to be able to answer all of them, but there's one about the differentiation of your direct air capture technology versus other providers out there. Can you give us a bit of an overview of that? How does kind of Climeworks stand out versus other carbon direct air capture technology out there?
Yeah. So basically, you have two types of filter material if you want. So what needs to happen to capture CO2 from the air is put the air in contact with a filter material, right? That will then bind with the CO2 specifically. And then once this filter is saturated, you would heat it to liberate and free the CO2 that you can capture as more or less pure CO2 gas. Right, so that's in a nutshell the process. And this filter material can either be solid, that's the case for Climeworks, or can be liquid. And for instance, that's the case for carbon engineering or 1.5 as a deployment partner of carbon engineering, for instance. And that calls into different scales that you can operate your business as a starting point. That calls for different heat. Climeworks processes uses low-grade heat, about 80 to 100 degrees, right? So that's your kettle in your kitchen. So that can be also using any type of energy, including renewable energy. That's part of our specificity in terms of the technology. And then what's really proprietary then is what you see here. So those containers that you see that can be stacked behind me, where the fan that you see at the outside of it will then draw the air in contact with the sorbent that's inside this box, and then where the capturing process will happen. So then the CO2 can then be processed for storage.
Amazing. Thanks, Julie. We have one more question around the Inflation Reduction Act, and the question whether you think that will give Climeworks everything you need to enter the US market, or is there still other things in terms of regulatory perspective that would be needed to kind of enter the US market?
Well, maybe a couple of clarification on that. So the first one is, I mean, there is there's no such thing as a US or Europe market, right? Like the market is global. Our technology can be placed anywhere, given we work with the atmosphere, right? And the CO2 concentration are homogeneous around the globe. And what we need is upstream renewable energy and downstream quality storage, right? Definitely, the Inflation Reduction Act in the US is a massive, massive tailwind for the industry at large, and the ambition of building these dark hubs is definitely what we need. Given the magnitude of the challenge and the speed, there is always more you can do, right? More on the market side from incentivizing more long-term purchases from companies, but also making sure, which is not yet super detailed in the Inflation Reduction Act, everything around the infrastructure. So what I was mentioning before around the permitting, for instance, right? These hubs will work if we have the right storage partners, if we have the permitting for storage are granted, and so that calls for a huge ecosystem. But of course, this is a significant step forward, and we're very happy about it.
Yeah, but you already work pretty global, right? Obviously, your
Yeah.
plant's location it doesn't need to be co-located with your customers. So I guess that's the main point, right?
Yeah.
For anybody listening at the early stages, right? Like you work with loads of big companies. We talked about Microsoft and UBS and Stripe and so on. These have all quite a lot of resources to put towards this and manpower. For early stage founders that are in their journey, what is kind of a lean way to get started on this? We're thinking about impact hustlers, like just a kind of few people involved, me full time and a few part-time people running this, but also a lot of the founders we work with that may have 4 or 5 people and that still want to think about this from day one. What's your advice to them?
Well, I would guess the number one advice we would give, as Climeworks is get it on the ground. Especially when that's probably true from, for a lot of ideas that you just have to get there, right? Get out there. But I think it's particularly true when it comes to direct air capture because you interact with an organic element, which is the atmosphere, right? So you can do that in the lab. It's perfect. The temperature is perfect. The humidity level is perfect. There's no wind. It's all calibrated and measured, but when you go out there, it's a different story, right? Sometimes it's rain, sometimes there's a lot of wind. I mean, talk about Iceland, right? And kind of extreme climate in winter. That's really important. I think that's what we have learned. Before that, we had a previous generation, right, that we just announced we'll move away from because we've learned so much from our first direct air capture generation in our plant in Hinwil in Switzerland, close to Zurich. So it's really get it out there, iterate, learn on how the technology operates in the field. I think that's the best feedback and the most immediate, tangible feedback you can get on the technology.
Got it. Last question for you. What's next in the next couple of years for Climeworks? Is it just about expanding, building more plants, and getting more companies to partner with you? Or what's kind of your focus for the next couple of years and your vision for, let's say, the next 10 years from now?
Well, I mean, the vision of the company is really clear, right? It's inspiring 1 billion people to remove CO2 from the air and understanding that on top of the emission reduction, we need to remove CO2 from the air. And that's really the mission that also is at the root of the creation of Climeworks. Jan and Christoph, the two founders, have started with direct air capture way before the company was founded, actually as part of this PhD program. So really already envisioning that this would be needed, looking with their own eyes about the recession of glacier in the Alps. So I think that's really the vision, engaging as many people as possible into this conversation. And in order to do that in the magnitude that we need to do and going towards the gigaton scale in 2050, a couple of things needs to happen at the same time. So as you said, voluntary market, making sure we have the right support from the current market, which is a voluntary one, having the right standard, and then deploying the technology on the ground, building more plants, bigger plant, learning and iterating. Right. This plant in 1 year has taught the entire company a great deal about how to operate. Will be integrated into the next plan, but also in the next technology generation, and so on and so on. So that's really the focus area. that we have to drive hard.
Amazing. Thank you, Julie, so much for joining me
You're
today. It
welcome.
was a
Thanks for
pleasure to
having
do this
me.
again. I hope we get many more
Likewise.
panels and fireside chats to come in the
Yes,
future. And thanks for
likewise.
joining me
Yeah, and I
again.
can just encourage anyone to reach out to us, to me. I'm easy to find on LinkedIn or anything in case there are more questions. That's always a pleasure that we can answer that. We'd be very happy to.
Perfect. Thank you.
Right.
We have some of our guests as well shouting out some research that their organizations have done. So Adam and Lindsay, thanks for sharing that as well. Anybody can check that out as well. And I will quickly tell you what's next now. We actually have a networking session coming up from now on. And that's really the exciting part of the summit, where you can head to the networking tab on the left to your screen.
Okay.
Julie, feel free to join as well if you want. And you can connect to the other attendees of the summit. Really, the serendipity of this event is, what this is all about. So it allows you to meet a new person every couple of minutes. You can speak to up to 15 minutes, but we encourage you to keep it brief as well. There's no harm in just switching after a few minutes. Just get to know each other, and obviously make sure that you exchange your contact details, which is actually, you will find a little button in the top right corner, I believe, that allows you to do that. So do take the time to connect to fellow audience members, go to the networking tab, and then we will be back very shortly after that with an exciting session, how to beep the planet. I'm not quite sure how correct I have to be on Hopin. I guess we're not streaming to YouTube, so it should be fine. Really excited to welcome Clay Dumas, the co-founder of Lower Carbon Capital, in conversation with Mia Diawara, partner at Lower Carbon Capital. Really excited for those two to join us after the networking session. See you all again later, and thanks, Julie, again.
Great choice. Bye-bye.